Hey, this is Om Malik, and I'm talking to.
Omar Hamoy, the founder and CEO of AdMob.
How you doing, Omar?
I'm doing well.
So you're here to tell us about the state of the Apple iPhone App Store.
Well, that and I guess mobile in general.
But everybody's interested in the App Store, right?
Right. Well, so are we.
You're making a lot of money from that.
Yes. Things are going really well there. I mean, I think it was certainly a surprise to us when we launched our iPhone ad units. We were pretty much banking on seeing what we had seen previously, which is most of the activity happening on the web and a limited amount of activity happening in applications, and exactly the opposite happened. So I think that's been a pretty big eye-opener for us when we're thinking about.
What percentage of your business comes from applications now? Of the entire AdMob inventory, how much are you serving up on iPhone and iPod Touch?
Well, those are two different questions. There's the
Right.
iPhone and iPod
Sorry.
Touch, and then there's in applications. The majority of the ads we serve on iPhone and iPod Touch, vast majority, so north of 50-60% is in application, and that wouldn't be vast, but anyway. And then it's about 20% of the overall ads that we're serving for the whole business.
Right. Which are, and why is that? Is it because the large screen and the touch ability make them more attractive to not only the advertiser but to the end user as well?
Essentially, I mean, I think it's the entire usage. It's the entire usage pattern of users. I mean, what we're seeing is when the device launched, we really spent a lot of time thinking about, look, even if only 5% of devices that are connected internet devices in mobile are iPhones or iPod Touches, if the users use it 10 times more, that's going to be 50% of the activity. And it really is starting to look something like that. The usage is just so off the charts that the fact that people talk about market share. The fact that there's still a relatively small number of devices doesn't really mean that there's a small amount of usage. The usage has been tremendous.
How many impressions do you serve up on iPod and iPhone?
We serve about 2 billion a month at this point.
Right, and growing at what speed?
Probably north of 20% a month.
And this is entirely driven by new application usage, or is it people are using the same apps over and over?
It's mostly either new applications or new installs of the same apps, but one thing that we have noticed, and I think a lot of other companies have noticed as well, is that there's a fairly steep fall off in terms of when a user installs an application. They tend to use it for a couple of weeks and then move on to the next thing. So
right.
they're kind of snacking. They don't really spend a ton of time with one app.
Yeah, but I spent a lot of money on those apps.
Right.
So this was my next question. It's like we are up to 25,000 applications.
That's right.
Heading towards a future where there will be 100,000 applications.
Yeah.
What are the challenges Apple, the iTunes App Store actually faces, in coming months?
I think the underlying system, and I think a lot of people have talked about this, the underlying system isn't particularly built for scale. And it's not, I don't mean scale like lots of users. I mean scale like lots of applications, lots of installs. I mean the idea of having the App Store, which is essentially a directory, providing you with a way to install apps, and then having those apps essentially sort of sit on your desktop on one of 8 screens is ultimately limited. I mean, there's going to need to be a different way, I think, of engaging with applications, because you're going to want hundreds of thousands of these things, and to be able to find them in probably a different way.
I guess the one way to stand out if you're an app developer at that point is figure out a very novel, intelligent, engaging experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, getting one of the right now I think app developers are competing probably based on installs. I think they're going to need to start to compete based on repeat usage. And I think Apple is actually heading in that direction with the new payment systems. The fact that there's subscriptions now and virtual goods is going to really make the winners be those people who can have a deeper and longer experience in terms of their usage, as opposed to the ones who can just get the most installs up front.
So what will be those kind of applications?
I think the easiest ones that come to mind are really the sort of slightly more immersive social gaming kinds of things. So I think the people who are on Facebook who are making a ton of money, the Zyngas and those kinds of players who have virtual poker or these other kinds of games where you buy goods and you need those to actually interact, are probably the ones that I can see will be the early winners. I think over time there will be certainly others that are doing other things that.
I do find this very interesting that Facebook is a good example or good trendsetter in a sense. There were a lot of early applications for Facebook and they all kind of went away.
Yep.
And you're seeing the same on the iPhone, it seems like.
Yeah, I agree. I think looking at the Facebook, the whole sort of ecosystem around Facebook and app developers as a predictor of what might happen on the iPhone is probably a good thing to look at. I mean, I think that the iPhone has some other capabilities that Facebook doesn't have, and Facebook's much more connected than the iPhone actually is with friends and stuff. But all in all, it's a good analogy.
Apart from iPhone, there are a couple of other, like there's a few other smartphone platforms, Nokia, Symbian, Android, BlackBerry, Windows Mobile, and Limo.
Yep.
If you were a betting man, who would you pick to be like a runaway success like iPhone?
That's hard. I would probably think either Android or BlackBerry. I think they have the two probably the best chances. And I think Android has the problem that it could become really fragmented, and if it does, then it's unlikely that it will be. If developers have to build more than one version of their application to run on a single platform, I think that's going to be a problem. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah. I see you do very well on Android, which is surprising because Google should be doing a ad system for Android, right?
Right. And they will, I'm sure.
Yeah. But it's funny that they put the cart before the horse in this case. But really, and why do you feel that Android will do well?
I think that given the fact that it's a free OS and that basically all the manufacturers are going to need to figure out a way to compete with the iPhone, it's a pretty compelling thing to do. Developing an OS is expensive, and being able to use something that's already out there to put yourself on par or close to par with the iPhone, I think everybody's going to have to do it. So I think that we're going to see tons of devices, and if they can actually keep these things from getting overly fragmented, I think it has a fair chance of a decent install base. And the last thing I'll say is, what we've seen from a usage standpoint is that usage is it's the only other class of device we've seen with roughly on the same par usage as an iPhone. So there's 1 million Android devices out there right now, but the usage patterns look similar to the iPhone.
Interestingly, does that mean that people are actually clicking through and interacting with the ads at the same rate on Android also?
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty interesting.
Yep.
What about BlackBerry and Symbian?
Less.
I mean, is Symbian actually in the game at all?
A little bit. I mean, I shouldn't say a little bit. Symbian's hugely in the game on the mobile web, especially outside of the U.S. So it's a pretty U.S.-centric point of view to say that Symbian doesn't matter. I mean, and for us, over half of our revenue is generated outside the U.S., so we definitely keep it in mind, and it's important to us. But that's mobile web browsing. We haven't seen very huge installations or activity inside of Symbian applications. We haven't seen a lot of that yet.
Talking about mobile web, so Google's big vision is HTML5 and Google Gears to hell with specialized apps.
Yep.
What do you think of the world from that perspective, and how does your business get impacted?
I think that it's certainly in Google's interest for that to be the way the world works, because the web is, they can index those things, they can crawl them, they can search them, they can do everything that they're good at, as long as the world proceeds along that direction. I'm not sure what the conclusion is, and I think generally speaking, a lot of what people have to do in mobile is sort of pick a winner, and this has been the history, right? What platforms are we going to develop apps for? How are we going to port it? Where are we going to focus? Are we Java? Are we Brew? Are we this? Are we that? And largely speaking, we've made sure that we don't have to pick a winner. So I mean, I can tell you, but from our business standpoint, we keep active everywhere because we essentially think that any of these things could take off. I think ultimately though, there's definitely going to be a pretty large amount of activity in both areas, because I think there's some apps that just lend themselves that aren't really possible in HTML5. Some of these games and other rich apps aren't possible, and plenty of apps that lend themselves great to be searched, right? And you'd rather have them in HTML than an app. So
last question for you.
Yeah.
What is your advice to the fledgling app developers or mobile app developers, and how they should think about this world, and how should they think in terms of integrating, let's say, your advertising or anybody else's advertising solution?
I would say that I think in terms of advice, I would say rather than thinking about the lure of a pretty shallow, quick hit, I really think that people should be spending more time thinking about a deeper experience. I actually think that the competition is going to be more about retaining users and keeping them interested in the application over a long period of time, rather than selling 200,000, 300,000 copies and then sort of fading into the distance. 'Cause that's possible, and it's nice, and it's alluring, and that's really what all the stories are about online. This person made $500,000. This person made $300,000. But I don't think this sort of hit model is really what people should be looking for. I really think they should be trying to do something deeper, and that's better for advertising as well.
So any specific tips you can give some
On advertising?
No, on to app developers. Like, what are the things they should be thinking about?
I really think they should be thinking about utility for users, and I think they should be thinking about the fact that this is a mobile device, that people are on the move, that they're out of their house, that they'll be looking for things that are different than they would be looking for at a PC, that they'll be able to do things differently than they'd be able to do from the PC. The more novel and mobile specific something is, the better it tends to do, and the more long-lived it is. And on the advertising front, what I would say, just as a tip that I'm not sure most people know about, it's not about showing people more ads, it's about showing them ads at the right point. So, for example, the apps that we've integrated with that show users ads at a logical exit point, like between levels or at the end of something or after a story is done, tend to show less ads but make much more money because users are done with whatever they were doing.
What will be an ad like that?
What would be an ad like that?
Oh, sorry, an app like that.
There's a number of them. I think you could take Bubble Wrap. It's a simple app. It's like a really fun little game, but they don't show ads to users until the level's done. And the user's logically going to leave the application. They tend to do very well that way.
Right. I see that your ads on MobiCast, which is my favorite application these days, given that I use it to track cricket scores. So,
okay.
So I'm pretty engaged with that.
Gotcha.
Those apps. But any other advice you have for young developers that they should, learn from, what you guys have been able to gather?
No, I really do. I mean, I think that not a ton more, but I actually think that it's hard to think about the depth of the experience and the value that you're offering as opposed to just how am I going to sell this thing very quickly up front. And I think that is going to fade. There's going to be too many people doing too many shallow things. So if people want to differentiate, they need to do something with a little more investment and depth behind it.
Thank you, Omar.
Yeah, thank you.